Hello everyone, welcome back. We've been talking about the internet, and today we're continuing our discussion by talking a little bit more in depth about HTTP and HTML. This is going to lead to a HTML project, which I think you're going to kind of like. Firefox does not like some of my Google stuff. Un momento. That's Spanish for hold up. Here we go. We're going to start out with our code.org video where they kind of introduce us to this concept of HTTP and HTML.
I'm Jasmine Lawrence, and I'm a program manager on the Xbox One engineering team.
One of our biggest features is called Xbox Live. It's an online service that connects gamers from all around the world, and we rely on the internet to make that happen. This is no easy task, and there are a lot of things happening behind the scenes.
The internet is totally changing how people interact and connect. But how does it work? How do the computers all across the world actually communicate with each other? Let's look at web browsing. First, you open a web browser. It's the app you use to access the web pages. Next, you type in the web address, or URL, which stands for Uniform Resource Locator, of the website you want to visit, like tumblr.com.
Hi, I'm David Karp, the founder of Tumblr, and we're here today to talk about how those web browsers we use every day actually work. So you've probably wondered what actually happens when you type an address into your web browser and then hit enter. And it really is about as crazy as you can imagine. So in that moment, your computer starts talking to another computer called a server that's usually thousands of miles away. And in milliseconds, your computer asks that server for a website, and that server starts to talk back to your computer in a language called HTTP. And HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And you can kind of think of it as the language that one computer uses to ask another computer for a document. And it's actually really pretty straightforward. If you were to intercept the conversation between your computer and a web server on the internet, it's mainly made up of something called GET requests. And those are really very simply the word GET and then the name of the document that you're requesting. So if you're trying to log into Tumblr and load our login page, all you're doing is sending a GET request to Tumblr's server that says get/login. And that tells Tumblr server that you want all of the HTML code for the Tumblr login page. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And you can think of that as the language that you use to tell a web browser how to make a page look. So if you think about something like Wikipedia, which is really just a big, simple document, and HTML is the language that you use to make that title big and bold, to make the font the right font, to link certain text to certain other pages, to make some text bold, to make some text italic, to put an image in the middle of the page, to align the image to the right, to align the image to the left.
The text of a web page is included directly in the HTML, but other parts, images or videos, are separate files with their own URLs that need to be requested. The browser sends separate HTTP requests for each of these and displays them as they arrive. If a web page has a lot of different images, each of them causes a separate HTTP request, and the page loads slower. Now, sometimes when you browse the web, you're not just requesting pages with GET requests. Sometimes you send information, like when you fill out a form or type a search query. Your browser sends this information in plain text to the web server using an HTTP POST request.
So let's say you log into Tumblr. Well, the first thing you do is you make a post request. That is a post to Tumblr's login page that has some data attached to it. It has your email address. It has your password. That goes to Tumblr's server. Tumblr's server figures out that, okay, you're David. It sends a web page back to your browser that says, success, logged in as David. But along with that web page, it also attaches a little bit of invisible cookie data that your browser sees and knows to save. And that's really important because it's really the only way that a website can remember who you are. And all that cookie data really is an ID card for Tumblr. It's a number that identifies you as David. And your web browser holds on to that number, and then the next time you refresh Tumblr, the next time you go to tumblr.com, your web browser knows to automatically attach that ID number with the request that it sends over to Tumblr server. So now Tumblr server sees the request coming from your browser, sees the ID number, and knows, okay, this is a request from David.
Now, the internet is completely open. All of its connections are shared, and information is sent in plain text. This makes it possible for hackers to snoop on any personal information that you send over the internet. But safe websites prevent this by asking your web browser to communicate on a secure channel using something called Secure Sockets Layer and its successor, Transport Layer Security. You can think of SSL and TLS as a layer of security wrapped around your communications to protect them from snooping or tampering. SSL and TLS are active when you see the little lock that appears in your browser address bar next to the HTTPS. The HTTPS protocols ensure that your HTTP requests are secure and protected. When a website asks your browser to engage in a secure connection, it first provides a digital certificate, which is like an official ID card, proving that it's the website it claims to be. Digital certificates are published by certificate authorities, which are trusted entities that verify the identities of websites and issue certificates for them, just like a government can issue IDs or passports. Now, if a website tries to start a secure connection without a properly issued digital certificate, your browser will warn you. That's the basics of web browsing, the part of the internet we see day to day. To summarize, HTTP and DNS manage the sending and receiving of HTML, media files, or anything on the web. What makes this possible under the hood are TCP/IP and router networks that break down and transport information in small packets. Those packets themselves are made up of binary, sequences of ones and zeros that are physically sent through electric wires, fiber optic cables, and wireless networks. Fortunately, once you've learned how one layer of the internet works, you can rely on it without remembering all the details. And we can trust that all those layers will work together to successfully deliver information at scale and with reliability.
I'm going to back her up here for a second. Why is that not working? So here we're seeing, she's basically talking about the layers that these things go through. So we've talked about binary a long time ago. Ultimately, this stuff needs to get translated in binary. We talked about TCP/IP last week, where basically there's some metadata that gets attached to each packet, right? And we section a bigger file down into smaller and smaller packets. And then the actual file we're talking about, the thing that gets broken down into packets and eventually translated into binary, is up here on this top layer. And that's kind of our focus today, is talking about HTTP and HTML, which is essentially the backbone of websites. Now, this video also talked about cookies. It also talked a little bit about cybersecurity. We'll come back to both those concepts, both cookies and cybersecurity. What I want to talk about is kind of this HTML, because I think it's a little interesting. So let's go full screen on this bad boy. When you enter a URL into the web browser, otherwise known as a web address, you are making an HTTP GET request. HTTP standing for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Don't worry about that. In fact, don't really worry about a lot of this stuff. URL is pretty important. I mean, that term gets thrown around a lot, as well as web browser. HTTP, I just wouldn't focus on it. This GET request idea, I wouldn't focus too much on that, because really all you're doing is requesting a file from a server. A server being another computer designed to distribute said file. So what a website actually is, it's just another computer, effectively, that has the associated website files, HTML files, maybe images, maybe some other type of video media. All you are doing when you are going through a web browser and connecting to a website is asking that server for those website files. In this scenario, your computer is considered a client. This is sometimes called the client server model. That's all very fancy. It is my computer, when I go to a website, is connecting to another computer asking for files. That's really it. We add a lot of, I feel like, unnecessary vocabulary here when discussing this, but the only reason why I even introduce these words, client and server, is because what you're going to kind of see, if you go deep into web development, maybe that's something you're super interested in. We kind of talk about code in terms of client side and server side. So it's possible that this is kind of one of the things that makes web development a bit of a challenge, is that you're writing codes for both sides. Effectively, whenever we're writing code, like in Java, it's usually just one computer doing all of the work, right? But when you go to visit a website, there are two sides of it. There's the client, that is your computer. Sometimes there's code that needs to run on your side of things, that is client side. And then there's code that could possibly needs to be run on the server side. Maybe it's connecting to a database, for instance, essentially a giant Excel spreadsheet that's logging all the data. So it's a challenge with web development. There's code that has to be client side, there's code that has to be server side, and sometimes those are different languages, sometimes they're not. Anyway, the file that you are most likely requesting, you the client, whenever you go to a website, what you're most likely requesting is an HTML file. This stands for Hypertext Markup Language. HTML is the standard markup language for documents designed to be displayed in a web browser. And I got a little bit of an aside here. Let's jump to that. HTML is a markup language, not a programming language. So this is kind of a peeve. It's one of those things that people will put it on their resume and be like, oh, list out the programming languages you know. Well, I know Java and C++ and HTML. If you really knew what you were doing, you wouldn't put HTML there, because HTML is a markup language, not a programming language. Now, the difference is a markup language is just annotating the text. As we're going to see with HTML, we're just tagging bits of text. And all that's really doing is kind of defining a structure and changing the presentation of the text. The big distinction is, I'll get to it in just a second, common manipulations include changing the font size, centering the text, making it bigger, bold, italicized. Like, we're just changing the way that the text is presented, the way that it looks. The biggest difference between these two, a markup language and a programming language, is that a markup language doesn't have any type of logic, such as conditionals or if statements or loops. And realities are you can't have loops without conditionals, so I could just be like, you don't have any logic, you don't have any conditionals. So we can't make logical decisions with HTML. It's a markup language. All it does is change the way that text is presented. Okay, no logic, no conditionals, no if statements, no loops. So HTML is the standard markup language for documents designed to be displayed in a web browser. It defines the structure of a web page through these things known as HTML elements. They are pieces of content like text or images wrapped in an opening and closing tag. Here's an example. We have an opening tag, right? We notice that this tag uses less than, greater than symbols or angle brackets. And P, this is my opening tag, and the closing tag is essentially the same one, but with a /. This whole thing is considered an HTML element. The P's, these are my tags, right? They kind of mark the beginning and end of this. The stuff in between the tags is considered content. Right? So the opening and closing tag in the above HTML element indicate this content is a paragraph. Only the content, that is hello world, will be rendered, that is displayed by the web browser. Tags are hidden. So this tag, this is the annotation that we're talking about. I'm annotating this content with paragraph tags. The actual tags themselves won't show up. That is basically just for the computer to interpret. What will show up is the content that's inside of it. Now, most HTML elements, right, keep in mind this whole thing is considered an HTML element, are going to appear in the body of an HTML document. So I need to kind of talk about the general structure of an HTML document. you're going to see this stuff in every HTML document, right? One thing I kind of want you to notice is that we have an opening tag here and a closing tag here for HTML. Opening tag here, closing tag here. This is nested inside of this, right? Our head is nested inside of this HTML. Our body is also nested inside this HTML. Let's talk about these parts. What you're going to see is further nesting inside of our head. We're going to see maybe a title. Down in our body, maybe we see this H1 tag. More on that in a second. Here's our paragraph tag, right? This is a paragraph. This is another paragraph. Let's break these apart. So at the very top is this declaration. This is technically not considered an HTML element. This is basically so we can tag the file telling the computer this is an HTML document. Now, HTML can be written in Notepad, right? There are, when we're talking about Java, you could actually write Java in a Notepad, to be honest. You don't want to do it, right? You want to get an IDE in an integrated development environment, and there are IDEs that exist for HTML to help you develop a web page. But you could write it in Notepad, and it's not incredibly uncommon. I mean, I don't recommend it for industry, but this is essentially some type of declaration at the very top of our file so that the computer knows this is, or the browser knows, this is an HTML document. And you want to use essentially HTML to display this stuff. So from this point on, the stuff that we encounter, we would know it's HTML stuff. We see our opening and closing HTML tags. These mark the beginning and end of the HTML document. Now, I was trying to dig pretty hard to figure out why do we even need these things. Some old versions, we technically don't need the HTML tags, but one of the things that we kind of found, or I kind of found, is that if you go deep on this, you can incorporate JavaScript directly into the file, the HTML document, but JavaScript itself is a scripting language. It's different from HTML. And so it can be included in the file, but maybe designated outside of the HTML area. Also with this HTML tag, you end up maybe tagging like a language or something. It's not super important. But these things, these HTML opening and closing tags, it seemed weird that they would exist to me. Like, in theory, I already know this document is HTML. Why do I need these? But you do need them in practice. We have the head section. Okay, so our HTML document is going to consist of a head and a body. And the head is where we put like metadata at. There's information in this section that's not rendered on the web page itself, but is important overall. One of the most common things you're going to see here is a title, and we'll talk about where this shows up, but it's not actually rendered right there in the main part of your web page. So the main focus is actually going to be the body. This is where all of the meat really goes. Everything that's inside of these body tags will be rendered on the web page. This is where the vast majority of HTML elements will appear, such as headings. Right, this H1 tag is actually one of 6 heading sections, right, ranging from H1 to H6. And a heading is going to be just that, right? You like kind of title a section of your web page, and then you have maybe a couple of paragraphs. But also, this is where we're going to put things like tables and lists and images. Let's code. So as I mentioned, there are several IDEs. In practice, I would use something like Sublime or Visual Code Studio, but as it turns out, we can code this thing in Notepad or IntelliJ. So let's open up the IntelliJ. How's everyone doing today? If you don't have IntelliJ, your computer's struggling to run IntelliJ, that's perfectly okay. You can use Notepad, right? Like literal Notepad that's on a Windows machine, and there's something equivalent on the Apple things. But essentially, there's no like like autocomplete, right? What's really the reason you want kind of an IDE is it's going to show you like available options as well as a little bit of autocomplete action. For instance, anytime you do an opening tag, as we're going to see in just a moment in IntelliJ, it's going to automatically insert the closing tag for us, and that sort of thing just really makes your life easy. You can use Notepad, and there's some online like actual cloud-based or web-based IDEs that'll help you with coding HTML. I'm in IntelliJ, and so I'm going to make a new project by going to File, New Project. And I'm going to step through this like as normal. We're going to end up writing HTML, but I'm going to create a Java project. We don't have to. There's no real reason to. In practice, you can have Java code actually alongside of your HTML code. But I'm basically just doing this to keep us on track for what we're used to, right? We're used to just making Java projects, so we're going to roll with that. I'm calling this bad boy HTML. And I'm going to expand my project folder. I'm going to right click on the SRC and do a new, not Java file. Notice that a little bit down we have HTML file as one of our options. And this is going to be really nice because whenever we create our HTML file, which I'm going to call index, you see that IntelliJ is going to include a lot of stuff for us, right? We see the declaration, we see the opening HTML tag, and here we see where it's actually setting the language to English. That's one of the reasons I told you that maybe this exists. We see our head section, and I'm actually going to grab that and tab it over, right? I highlighted all four of these lines. This is essentially selecting a font family type of thing. Don't worry about this. And then last thing we see is our title as part of our head section. I'm going to separate the head from the body, and again I'm going to grab these body lines and tab those over. But this is one of the reasons that maybe you want some type of IDE as opposed to Notepad, is because this type of information gets generated. Now, here's what I want to do. I'm actually going to kind of run what we got, and then we'll come in and make some changes and add to it. And you'll notice that it keeps like popping up some options up here, right? What web browser do you want to use? Another way to actually run this is I'm going to right click, and there should be an option. I'm struggling. I can open with or run with, show and explore, file path, open in browser. That's what I'm looking for. So if you right click on the file, keep in mind this is an HTML file. It's meant to be run in a web browser. So even though we're designing an IntelliJ, we're not going to use IntelliJ to actually execute it. We're going to open it in a browser. Your choice, Chrome, Firefox, whatever. So I'm going to open up this bad boy, and I'll bring it over to our side. And there's not really anything here. I would like you to notice that right up here, let's see if I can zoom in on that. I don't know if this actually works. Right up here in the upper left-hand corner, on the actual tab itself, it says title. If we look back at our IntelliJ code, here it says title. That's where this bit shows up, right? So if I come in here and change this to, I don't know, hello world, and I was to right click on my file again and open in browser, I bet I can right click over here, yep, and open in some type of browser. It's actually going to change the title on the tab. So that's where that shows up, right? And this could be important because whenever you like bookmark a page, that's what shows up there. So this part, the stuff that's in the head, isn't actually rendered in the browser. The title shows up on the actual tab itself. How can we do any of this in Notepad? It's literally this exact same bit of code, right? This is all the same, but you save the file as an HTML file, right? I'll show you real fast. So I'm going to copy this bad boy. And I've got it all right here in Notepad. It's the exact same stuff. When I go to save it, I'm going to do a file save as, and I'm going to call it index.h. Interesting that we're on system 32. Let's throw it like in documents or something. Index.html, and I'm going to change the drop down to all files. So we are changing, instead of saving it as a text file, I'm saving it as an HTML file. And so if I go and find it, I go to open it, it's going to open in a web browser. So here we are in my documents. I'm going to double click on the index.html, and notice it says hello world up here. So all this works in Notepad. I don't recommend Notepad. I really recommend something else. But so that's our head. That's all that we're really going to change there is our title. I really want to get to this body where we can have things such as H1 headings. Right? So here I am typing in my tag. IntelliJ automatically entered the closing tag for me. This is a heading, and H1 is actually the largest of a heading. So why don't we do this is a heading. If I right click and tell this to open in a browser, this is what we're getting now. We have our Hello World title up top and our heading showing up here. This is a pretty big text, but I can then come in and maybe have a paragraph. This is a paragraph. Again, I'm going to reopen this in a browser. Okay. So one thing I'd like you to notice is that the tags themselves are not showing up, only the content. We're using the tags to kind of annotate the content, basically saying, this is how I want this displayed, right? This H1 is saying, this is a heading, treat it special, make it huge. There's more headings, right? Like H1 is the largest. H6, notice this actually auto changed for me. H6 is actually one of the smaller ones. Makes it just slightly smaller, right? Here's our H1 heading. Here is our H6 heading. So the actual tags themselves are not showing up. We're just using those to kind of change the way the actual content, in this case text, is displayed. Right? We see our paragraph. We can come in and make a second paragraph. This is another paragraph. And the P's are actually kind of enabling this to go down a different line. It changes the way this displays. We're sectioning off this bit of content saying this is its own paragraph. I'm going to go back to my H1. But notice that this stuff is nested. I told you that some other options are that maybe we can bold or italicized. And so here's where you would do something like that. I have a paragraph started. Maybe I want to kind of emphasize this is another paragraph. Notice that this italics is actually nested within the paragraph itself. So what this is going to do is italicize only this content, which is one word in this case. Right? This is another paragraph. I could tack on even more tags. Indicating that this is bold, right? This one singular word is going to be both italicized and bolded, and those tags are nested within the paragraph, which is nested in the body, which is nested in the HTML. So this is what we mean whenever we say that HTML gives the document structure. All this nesting allows me to kind of section off things. Let's get a little bit more complicated with it. Other things that I can have are list, right? We can have something known as an ordered list. OL stands for ordered list. And within an ordered list, we have a list item. Give me some type of topic. something that our list can be about. Groceries, cars, coronavirus. Boo. Let's go with groceries. What groceries are you stocking up on right now? Toilet paper. Yes. Let's add toilet paper. All right. So I have an ordered list. Most important, we got toilet paper. If I add another list item, we can get some beans. We can get some rice. And we'll go with that. Notice how this is structured, right? I have the opening tag, which is marking the beginning of my ordered list. I have the closing tag, which says this is the end of that ordered list. Inside of my list, there are list items. Let's run this and see what it looks like. Right, the ordered list gives me 1, 2, 3. It adds the numbers to it. That's pretty nice. That's pretty convenient. A slightly different option is an unordered list, or UL. The difference there is it's bulleted instead. Okay, so maybe I would include, like in practice, some type of header, like in H3, to say what this list is, right? This is a grocery list. I think we may be able to incorporate it directly into this item, right? This is a header that belongs to this unordered list, but is not actually a list item itself. They kind of indented it. Okay. We're not compiling here. We're not having to go through some type of interpreter. This is just merely being rendered inside the web browser itself. In this case, the web browser basically is the interpreter. It's telling you, it's reading these tags and interpreting how these things should be listed. Okay. So there is the ordered list. There is the unordered list. Maybe something we want is images. Let's just throw in like a single image for now. Okay. Our image tag is going to, let's kind of tag it. IntelliJ doesn't like what I'm doing right now, and that's okay. Oh, what is this guy up here? Whoa. Why did botch all that? All right, let's say that we have an image. Oh, I guess image doesn't have a closing tag. That's why it's confused. So we're going to have an image. And now this one doesn't have a closing tag, but it does need to know where's your image coming from. Now, images can come from your local machine, your current computer. In practice, typically that means the server. The server not only is going to house this HTML document, it's going to house the actual image files that you're trying to display. And so what is going to be put here as a source would be a relative or absolute path to the image as it stands on the server or local machine. Don't worry about all that. What we're going to do, and what is not really that surprising, is that we're going to pull the image from something that's already online. Okay? So to do that, so basically we can put a URL here and we'll have that image show up on our web page. So I got a browser. Let's find maybe an image for toilet paper. This could go horribly wrong. So I've Googled toilet paper. We'll click over on images, and I got all these images for toilet paper. And what I'm going to simply do is grab one of these guys. What we care most about is the URL. So I'm going to right click on the image, and we're going to copy image location. I believe that's what I'm looking for. Yeah. So the the copy image location, this is called something very similar in whatever web browser you're using. I have Firefox here. We're going to copy the image location, and that's going to copy the URL itself. That's what I care about. Back here in my source code, inside of the src quotes, it's wanting to know, where's this image coming from? I'm going to paste that. Okay, and I do believe we actually need this / indicating that there's nothing else, that this is the image. I'm going to run this in my web browser. And there is our actual image. Now you can do some things to scale it down to get it kind of the size that you want. It can be either percentage based or pixel based. I'll let you kind of figure that out. But that is effectively how we get an image. And what I recommend is pulling it from an actual online website instead of trying to do your local thing. Now, if you want to go deep, I'm going to assign you a project very soon. And if you want to go deep, you could basically have images and go to their local path, and you can give me those images, and don't worry about that. One of the last major things I kind of want to show you is a table, right? A table is an awful lot like a ordered list or unordered list, where we can use it to really organize things on the web page. Tables are going to consist of rows and cells, but I have to group all that stuff together. Here I have an opening table tag and a closing table tag marking the beginning and end of my table. Now, like I said, tables are going to have rows, but you may also want a table head. Right? This is kind of the identifying information at the top of like each row. Give me a topic. What do we want our table to be about? What do we want our table to be about? TV shows, trees, grades. Let's pickle wet. Movies. Okay, let's do TV shows. So maybe we care about, the name of the TV show. So the head, right? This is going to be the top row, basically, of my table. And then each element within that row, each cell, as denoted by a TD tag, will actually show up within that header. So maybe we got the name of the TV show. Maybe we have, I don't know, original air date. And then maybe we have, I don't know, number of episodes. Okay, so I have the beginning and end of my table. We have a table header, right? This is going to be where the metadata is about our table. We have a name for a TV show. We have the original air date. We have number of episodes. So this TH is going to look slightly different from the rest of the rows. Let's get those rows in here. So I have TR denoting a table row. A table header is basically just a row, but the font is going to look slightly different. It's going to be like bolded, I believe, to kind of indicate that that is important data about each of the rows. So give me a show. I'll lead off. I'm going to do Stranger Things. That's a good one. So Stranger Things, I'm going to Google real fast some information. Stranger Things. Keep in mind that this row is going to kind of coincide with this header, right? So the first column here should be my name. And so here I'm going to do a TD, that is a table cell for Stranger Things. Stranger Things. Next should be my air date. So the structure that I'm following here, it's kind of up to me. It's not like strict syntax. I'm doing this stuff and then kind of hoping this thing makes sense. Original air date for Stranger Things. Oh, Wikipedia, I hope you give me that real fast. I see number of episodes. Original release, July 15th, 2016. So we're going to have 7/15/16. And then what we're going to have is number of episodes, which is 25. I'm going to take a look at this, and then we'll come back and we'll add another row. I want you to kind of see what is happening here. Right? We have our start and end of our table. We have a table header, which is going to be a special row. And then we have our first table row, which is about Stranger Things. So I'm going to run this. We got all the stuff like our heading, our paragraph, our sweet grocery list. Here's a random image. And here's my table, which doesn't look great, not going to lie. Instead of getting fancy with a table header, which it actually may be something else, let's just change that to a normal TR. Okay. So, maybe I can bring this up. Here's our table. The very first row is information about everything else. We got the name, air date, number of episodes. I would consider maybe making this stuff bold, that sort of thing. If you're interested in doing that, you could put tags around this. Corona. Right, I'm going to make these things bold. In practice, you would use something like CSS or get the actual table head working like an adult, but I don't have time for that. Aha, name, air date, number of episodes. We see Stranger Things came on in July, 25 episodes. I'm going to add another row to this table. So let's do another TR. I saw Game of Thrones as a potential show. Let's get some data about Game of Thrones real fast. Original release was April 17th of 2011. And number of episodes is 70 something, I think. 73. So I have this first row, which is important information about what's going on in my table. I've got this row, which is just the first row. And those elements coincide with the stuff that's in the head or header. And then here's another row following that exact same format. Let's run this. Sweet. Here is our table. So the main thing the table is doing is kind of keeping that stuff grouped and aligned. Now, in practice, you could go in and kind of play with these things, like a minimum width, for instance. I don't think this looks great. You could center these elements in these columns. You could go real deep on all this stuff, and it all evolves around HTML and kind of this concept of nesting. Now, right now I have text in here. You're not limited to text. We could put other HTML elements like images, for instance. So why don't we add another column here? And like notable images, notable image or logo or something. How about that? There's a better name for this, but essentially, you know, the Stranger Things logo I want to put in this last column. So I have this fourth column here, and let's go back. Let's get a Stranger Things logo. For reference, I'm on the Wikipedia. There's an image here. I want that image as part of my web page. I'm going to right click on it. And then what I care about is, I'm in Chrome with this time around, I want the image address. That's the same thing as the URL. So I'm going to copy that. And let's stick an image here. I need to denote the source, which is pretty thick URL, right? We have image, our source, an opening quote, then the actual URL, and I'm going to end that here. Notice that image, right? This whole thing is the image element, and it is wrapped inside of my table cell. Let's try that out. Ta-da! So this image is actually nested inside of a table cell, which is nested inside of a table row, which is nested inside of a table. So this is the HTML giving it structure. I'm going to find a Game of Thrones logo real fast. We could just reuse that toilet paper image, I guess. Again, I'm on Wikipedia. I've got this image here that I want. I'm going to right click on it, get the image address. Back in my source code, I'll throw in another table cell, but this time it's an image. All right, here's this big old element that is simply a link to an image, and you could play with the sizing of this, but that is wrapped inside of a table cell set of tags. I'm going to run this thing, and there's my Game of Thrones image. All right, sweet. Go to Canvas. So that's kind of like a lot of the basics here with HTML. It's a whole lot of nesting. It's not actually a programming language. There's no if statements here. It's just changing the way that we display all of this stuff. I'm going to give you a project. Finding it. Oh, it's not visible to you guys. Let me make it visible to y'all. Okay. So this one's called MySpace, which is a major predecessor to the Facebooks. I know I'm kind of dating myself here. Basically a boomer. So HTML is the standard markup language for creating web pages and web applications. Sets of HTML tags can be used to dictate how text and images will be rendered by a web browser. In this project, you will create a single HTML web page about yourself. Your web page must contain the following. And so here is the point breakdown of how much each of these are worth. You got to have a head. In that head, I want to see a title. You got to have a body. I then want a paragraph, and that to be 3 to 5 sentences within that paragraph. Again, this is about yourself. I want 3 links to other websites. Ooh, we didn't do a link. Let's do that. So all this information I was pulling about like Stranger Things and Game of Thrones, this would be something that maybe I want to link. I want to link this text. What I'm going to do is take Stranger Things or Game of Thrones, probably both, and wrap them into a link. So it's something that you can click on. You can go to the source of this information. So I was using Wikipedia. Let me bring one of those things back up. Right? We got Stranger Things here. This is the Wikipedia link. What we care about most, again, is this URL, this web address. So I'm going to highlight this bad boy. Notice it's HTTPS, more on that later. I'm going to copy this link. Once I have it copied, I'm going to come back in here and I want to wrap this text, this content, in a set of HTML tags. And that is the tags to link it. Now, this is a bit strange, but it's strange. This is going to be a href and then the link itself. Right, the tag to link is a and then href. So this is the link tag, and then this is saying this is the source. This is what do you want to link this to, and then we need a closing a tag to basically mark the end. So here's my opening link tag. Here's the closing link tag, and notice that it is wrapping Stranger Things. What that means is Stranger Things itself is what you'll be able to click on. Keep in mind that these tags are not actually rendered. So if I run this and bring back my web page, I love this giant roll of toilet paper, we see that Stranger Things looks slightly different. It is actually clickable. If I click on that, it's going to take me to the Wikipedia page. Let's do something similar, but for Game of Thrones. Here's our Game of Thrones Wikipedia page. I'm going to highlight the URL in the web address bar, address bar, I think is what we call it. I'm going to copy that URL. Okay. Back in my source code, I want to turn Game of Thrones into something that is a link. I'm going to wrap it in the text, the link tags. So we got a href. Watching that. Okay, here is the Game of Thrones Wikipedia link. All right, this is the opening tag. I need to actually indicate the closing, which is there. So Game of Thrones is now, this text is now wrapped in this link tag. So if I were to run this, I can click on Game of Thrones and it'll take me there. Okay. Of note, what I am actually linking here is text. But we're not limited to text, right? This whole structure of just wrapping things could actually be extended. Maybe what I want to wrap is actually this image. So we see kind of this whole thing that I've highlighted. Let's highlight all of it. This is my image. I want to wrap that in a link tag. So I'm going to come in here and do a href. I don't necessarily care what you link it to. I'm just going to link it to the Wikipedia as well. Maybe it gives us options. All right, so here is the opening. Here's the closing that IntelliJ auto inserted for me. But what I want to do is wrap the image. So I'm going to move that closing tag. Maybe it's better if we actually kind of use some new lines to show the nesting. Right, once our stuff gets pretty complex. I need to throw in my closing link tag. So what I have here is a table cell. Inside that table cell is a link. And what's inside the link is an actual image. This is slightly different from what we had up here, where it was text wrapped inside of a link. But it's the same concept. Let's try it. Now notice it doesn't really look different, but when I hover over it, it is clickable. Maybe you guys actually can't see that because my fat head's in the way. Oh my gosh. All right, so when I scroll over this, it's actually something that's clickable. And that's another way that I could actually get to the Game of Thrones Wikipedia. So we're not limited to text whenever we're linking. Right? We can actually wrap an image in this stuff. Sweet. Back to our project. So we got to have a head. In that head should be a title. We should have a body. In that body should be a paragraph with 3 to 5 sentences about you. I need 3+ images. I need 3+ links to other websites. I need a list or table with 3 or more rows. And something I kind of want you to recognize is these things are not exclusive. That is, you can make a table that includes images and links to websites. And it could be something about you. Here we had topics. Maybe your topic is TV shows that you like, or pizza toppings that you think belong on a pizza. Be careful, that one's controversial. Maybe it's games that you like to play. And then I want additional HTML elements. Right? One such HTML element that we talked about is like a heading or header. Maybe that's one of the things you incorporate. Maybe you do a little bit of research and actually find some other HTML elements that you want to incorporate into your source code. So in addition to your source code, index.html is what I'm asking you to call it. Submit a screenshot of your web page. Okay. In all honesty, this is basically what we did today, right? We did a lot of this stuff. It's really just taking that and retroing it. The source code that I've done today, would bold be considered an additional element? Yeah, I'll take that. Bold, italicized, I'll take that as additional elements. So in addition to your actual HTML code, I want a screenshot of your web page. And the stuff that we've done today, that'll be available on Canvas. Any more questions before we wrap it up, guys? I know as some people asking, when is this due? Don't necessarily know. I haven't given it too much thought. I didn't know if we would get this far. Will there be a quiz? Yes. Miss Vu, question mark. Yes. There will be a quiz. If you have more questions, we're available. Gosh, you're going to tell me that was all out of whack. If you have more questions, we're available on Discord. Let's chill.